As good as the New York Knicks are, they fumble the bag multiple times on big-name stars that would have easily made them the title favorite. How's it going, guys? And welcome back to the Howdy Hoopers pod. Today we're going to talk about the New York Knicks, and there's a couple different reasons why I want to talk about this team. First off, I'm trying to talk about as many teams as I possibly can before this regular season starts. So if there's a team I haven't talked about yet, or a player you want to hear more about, make sure to drop that in the comments so I can make sure to get them as soon as possible. But the other reason why I want to talk about this team is because recently there was a reporting that Shams came out with talking about how the Knicks and the Bucks last year talked about a potential trade to bring Giannis to the New York Knicks. And although, nothing came from it, the Knicks felt like they weren't giving their best offer because the Bucks weren't serious and the Bucks weren't exactly sure if Giannis wanted to be traded, but they were kind of exploring options. And the reason this is all going down is because obviously Giannis, he's going this weird back and forth thing. It's like he doesn't want to leave Milwaukee, but he wants to win. So it's like they come out with this thing saying, Giannis is happy. He's here for the long term. And then they turn around and interview him and he says, that didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about. So it's kind of this weird disgruntled star thing. And I think the Knicks had what it took to get Giannis, but with the certain moves they've made recently over the last year or two, I don't think they're in a situation where they could get Giannis without giving up a lot of key players and not have the picks that they would necessarily need to get him. But even with that too, I feel like they missed out on a chance to get a player like Kevin Durant. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit deeper. And why I'm talking about this is, so there's two players on the team that are very, very important to this team, but I also feel like they've put the Knicks in a bad situation. You see this quite often where, a team has a really good player, but either they're getting paid way too much or they're overvalued. And that's kind of what the Knicks did with these two players. With OG Anunoby, I know the Knicks had to overpay him to keep him. He was kind of in a weird situation where they had to pay him, the max they possibly could, or it seemed like he was just going to walk. So I know they had to pay that, but that was a big chunk of their salary cap. And the only reason they're able to have the players they have right now is because their star player, Jalen Brunson, took a major pay cut. Who knows? Maybe he's getting paid underneath the table like Kawhi. I guess we'll never know. Or maybe we will. Who knows? But anyways, if it wasn't for him taking that pay cut, they would not have the cap space in order to have all these players on their team that they do. But the other player that has put them in a bad situation is Mikal Bridges. And you might be wondering, Mikal Bridges is really important to this team. And I know both these players are very, very important to this team. But the reason why he put him in such a bad situation, it was out of his control. It wasn't anything to do with him. But they overpaid to get him on the team. I can't remember the exact number. It was like 4 first-round picks, 5. It was a lot. It was basically the same of what the Utah Jazz traded for Donovan Mitchell, who's a much better player, or same realm as Rudy Gobert, who was a multiple-time All-Star, DPOY, one of the greatest defenders in NBA history. And they gave up that to be able to get, Mikal Bridges on this team, which I think he's great on this team. His shot wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be last year, but I'm thinking this year maybe he'll bounce back. And you might be wondering, I'm saying all these super good things about both these players, how important they are to this team, but the amount of picks they had to give up for Mikal Bridges and the size of OG Anunoby's contract would have been maybe enough to get a team like Milwaukee to, trade you Giannis. If you're offering, OG Anunoby and maybe some other smaller players to fill in cap that they're interested in, you could trade, 4, 5, 6, whatever, how many picks you need to in order to bring Giannis. And then all of a sudden you have Karl Anthony Towns, you have Giannis, or you have a superstar level player with that paired with your already superstar player, Jalen Brunson. And you have this big three, and you're still able to keep all of these, smaller contract players that they brought in this year to, make their team much more deep. But the thing is, even if it wasn't Giannis, look what the Rockets trade to get Kevin Durant. They didn't really give up a whole lot to get him. You could have easily outbid the Rockets if you didn't have to give up all those picks in the Mikal Bridges trade. So it's kind of like, it's as good as the Knicks are, like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel like they've made multiple mistakes. And the thing is, I have to give them credit. They went out, they made the moves, they tried to do what they thought was right. There's a lot of teams out there, like I feel like the Warriors right now, that have kind of just been sitting on their hands for the last couple of years. They haven't been, trying to surround their star player with the talent they need in order to go all in and win a championship. But the Knicks have done that, so I have to give them credit for that. And with all that said, the Knicks are still, one of the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference. One of the top two favorite teams to come out of the Eastern Conference. It's either between them and the Cavs. And I think the Cavs are a better team, but you never know. They might be, one injury away. The Cavs, they didn't do nearly as good as the Knicks did last year in the playoffs. Then, the Knicks made it further than they did. But the thing is, with the team that beat the Knicks in the playoffs and made it to the finals isn't there this year. The Cavs have underperformed the last couple years. I think they'll do better this year, but they've underperformed. And, you have to kind of look into that. You have to be kind of cautious with a team like that that's underperformed for 3 years now. I think the first year was the lights are too bright. And then, I think this is their third year with their main core together. This will be their fourth year. So you have to be very cautious with a team like that. So the Knicks look like they're in a very, very good situation in order to make it. But there's a lot of other players in this team that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about their coach, Mike Brown. And the reason why I want to talk about Mike Brown is because there's a big difference between him and Tibbs. Thibodeau was a player or a coach that was playing his players, 45, 40, 42, whatever minutes per game. He was playing a really, really small rotation. And granted, this year's roster is much more deep, but he's known to do that. And with that, he's also a very, very defensive-minded coach. And a lot of their offense was, kind of just go out there, figure it out. If you're in a bad situation, give it to Jalen Brunson and let him do his thing. Where Mike Brown is an offensive-minded coach, we saw this with, the Sacramento Kings that first year they made the playoffs. They had the best offensive rating in NBA history up to that point. And, he turned a team that maybe should have not been there, made them a super exciting, fun team, lots of pace, lots of, in-your-face offense, and it made it a very exciting team. And with how much more talented this team is than that team, the Knicks could really switch from a team that, had a very stagnant, slow offense to a team that, has one of the most exciting offenses in the NBA, but still has all those, defensive players that are there. You still have the Mikal Bridges, you still have the OG Anunobys and all the different players. And I think that's very underrated. There's not a lot of teams that have, offensively skilled players to the level of OG and Mikal Bridges that also, they're great defenders and great offensive players. I know people always say 3-and-D, but those two players, if you consider them a 3-and-D player, are more on the higher end of a 3-and-D player, and you have both of them on your team. But another thing that I want to talk about with that is with your offense, if it really gets sped up like I think it could with Mike Brown, sometimes it makes your defense look better than it actually is. When you're able to get a rebound and go and speed the pace up, a lot of times you speed up the pace of the other team as well. And if your team is used to doing that and the other team isn't, a lot of times you saw this with the Pacers last year. They did it to the Knicks themselves, actually. They sped up the pace, and it played in their favor and made their defense seem better than it actually was because they sped them up, made their offense all disjointed, and didn't mess up their whole game plan. So I think we could see that as well. Their offense improving dramatically. They still have good defensive key players on their team, and also their offense might lead to making their defense seem better than it is. But with that being said, another thing that they're hinting at doing, and I've read a couple articles about, is running a 3-man guard lineup. And we saw this actually last night against the Timberwolves quite a lot, where off the bench we would see Jordan Clarkson out there. We would see Deuce McBride, and who was the other guy that was out there? I'm trying to remember who it was. Oh, it was Malcolm Brogdon. And I actually really, really enjoyed watching those players. Their offense seemed like, for a second unit team, and there wasn't really like a Jalen Brunson. Obviously there wasn't because there's only 3 guards out there, but there wasn't like Karl Anthony Towns or anyone else that was like, okay, they're the person, bringing the load from the starting lineup, carrying the load for the offense. It was mostly those 3 out there that were in the offense, and I really, really enjoyed watching it. It is kind of nice. I think Clarkson's about a 6'6" guard, so he kind of is he could be a tweener of a small forward. He's definitely played shooting guard his entire career. And getting him on a minimum contract, and a lot of these other players I'm talking about on minimum contracts, is actually huge. I know a lot of people gave up on Jordan Clarkson. He was injured quite a bit last year, and he hasn't been on a good Jazz team in a couple years. But the thing is, he had plantar fasciitis, I think that's how you say it, a lot of last year. He missed lots of games. He'd play one game and then miss 3 or 4 games or 10 games. He missed a lot of games. And so I think a lot of people forgot how good Jordan Clarkson is, especially on a team like this, where you have a great team. And when your starters go out, you have a player like Jordan Clarkson come in, whose nickname is the Flamethrower, and that's exactly what he can do. But the thing with Jordan Clarkson is, and this is how Utah embraced him so well, is some nights he's going to go out there and score 25 points in 18 minutes off the bench. And there's going to be some nights where he scores, 15 points on 20 shots. That's just how Jordan Clarkson is. But he's also the type of player that can swing the momentum for your team. He's the player that can make it so when your starters are out, when Jalen Brunson's on the bench, you don't have to worry about, we're going to have a stagnant offense. We can't do it. Like, you see it a lot with the Nuggets. Their offense gets very stagnant. Their team doesn't seem like they know what to do. And Clarkson's the perfect player to come in and, be that guy off the bench that, he'll put up a whole bunch of shots in real quick. I think it's kind of crazy that I've talked this much about the Knicks without talking about Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. But the reason that is because I feel like we know who these players are. We know what they're going to do. We know Jalen Brunson's going to be, a dynamic scorer. He's going to be, running the offense. And he's one of the best ISO players, maybe even one of the best ISO players at his height in NBA history. And I know they have him listed, I can't remember, like 6'2" or 6'3" or something like that. But this dude's he's literally 5'10", 6 foot. He's not as big as they say. And he's out here, giving your best defender in your team work every single night, putting up what it feels like 30 points. I know it's not quite 30 points a game, but feels like 30 points every single night. And the thing is, he's proved that he can do it in the playoffs too. I talked about this, I can't remember, it was a couple of videos ago, but I've been to a lot of NBA games, and I've seen a lot of really big stars. I've seen players like Kevin Durant. I've seen, Luka Doncic, Kawhi Leonard, name most big stars, Victor Wembanyama, players like that. I've probably been to around 40 games in my entire life, and I've seen a lot of really, really good NBA players, a lot of Hall of Fame level players. But I have to say the most dominant performance I have seen was by Jalen Brunson before he was even on the Knicks. I was at the Jazz game when the Mavericks were playing. It was his last year in the Mavericks, and Jalen Brunson was that was when he started to make a name for himself. But Luka Doncic was hurt during this game, and it looked like the Jazz should have had an easy win. They were still a good team at that point, and I think they were favored to win, especially with Luka Doncic being out for 2 or 3 games in that series. And that man, I had to watch for 48 minutes as that guy came up the court and single-handedly torched the Jazz. The Jazz team that had, Donovan Mitchell, Gobert, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, all these different. I think Royce O'Neal was on the team at that point. It was a really, really good team, a deep team. And I had to watch Jalen Brunson torch my team single-handedly for so long. But with that being said, we know who these players are. We know who Jalen Brunson is. We know who Karl Anthony Towns is. And we know exactly what they're going to do. We know that Karl Anthony Towns is, not a great defensive player, but he's one of the best offensive centers in the NBA right now. But who knows, even potentially, with how much he can space the floor, he's one of the most gifted, offensive centers we've seen in the NBA that can stretch the floor the way he does. But I feel like this team is just so deep, and that's what's different about this team is coaching, and even being able to get players like Yabusele and different players like I've talked about, like Jordan Clarkson, and having players off the bench like Deuce McBride. And I feel like there's solid 11 players, 12 players on this team that could play every single night. And that is so unique for a team that has this big of contracts in there. I feel like this happens every single video, but of course I ran out of memory again. It's definitely time for me to get a new card, but I'm the type of person that's like, oh, I'll just delete a couple videos and it'll be fine. But anyways, what I was saying is that this team is so deep, and that's one thing that is different from last year was the coaching change, a shift from a defensive-minded coach, and another shift is you're able to keep all of your key main players on this team, but you were also able to add, so many players on cheap contracts, like getting Jordan Clarkson on a minimum contract. You got Yabusele on such a good deal, a player that I've enjoyed watching, and I was so surprised when the Knicks were able to get him. But I'm just looking at this roster, and I'm like, this is a lot of pressure for a team. And I feel like this a lot with teams that are in that, like, okay, like we're going all in this year. We've had a couple different chances. I feel like this is kind of like the last run with this core team, and especially with teams like Boston and the Pacers being injured, and the Eastern Conference probably being the weakest we've seen in, 5 or 6, 7, 8 years. They've always been a weaker in conference, but for some reason this year, there isn't as many deep teams. Yeah, you could see teams like Detroit or Orlando make a big jump, but this is the year, which is scary for the Knicks, because it's like it's make or break this year. If they don't win this year, don't make it to the finals this year, expect to see a dramatic change next year. And they're really, really going to be kicking themselves when they look back and be like, man, we could have traded for Kevin Durant, got him on a cheap deal like the Rockets did. You could have easily outbid him if you didn't get players, trade away as many picks as you did in order to get this core. But the thing is, I'm excited to see where it goes. I would love to see, a new team make it to the finals this year from the Eastern Conference, whether that be the Cavs or the Knicks. I think for sure we definitely will, especially with, Halliburton being injured and the Pacers going on such a crazy run last year. I think we're most definitely going to see a different team in the finals, and I would definitely love to see it be the New York Knicks. And also I feel like it's, there's two teams in the NBA, especially when these teams are good, the NBA's at their best, and that's the Lakers and the Knicks. As much as I hate to say that, when these two markets are at the biggest, highest stages like the NBA Finals, the NBA performs better, we get a better product, and I feel like we just have more fans of the league and be able to draw more people worldwide to the league, which is also something that I'm always, want the NBA to grow, and I want to see the talent just get better and better and better, have more fans involved. But I think this year the Knicks should feel very, very excited. Their fans should be very excited. And I think there's going to be a lot of new fans with all these new players they've brought in. Jordan Clarkson has a crazy, following worldwide in the Philippines. He's got a big fan base that people loved him in Utah. And I got a feeling that, they're going to be a team that a lot of fans are rooting for. And I'm excited for it. But I want to hear what you guys think about the New York Knicks, what you think about the Eastern Conference, who's going to come out if the Knicks fumble the bag as much as I'm talking about. I've talked about that a lot, how, they fumbled on these big stars. But I want to hear, if there's other players I missed that they potentially could have went out and got. But I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to hear what other teams you want to talk about. So, drop them down in the comments, and I'll make sure to get to them. But I